So I thought I'd have a chat whilst I'm having a cup of tea. Yesterday in my previous video I mentioned about some health issues that I am going through at the moment that aren't necessarily talked about. Do you like my little minion? I love minions. I'm a bit sad. Yeah, last year in April I had a hysterectomy. I'd had a lot of problems beforehand with my periods being extremely bad. I was basically bleeding out really badly. I was ending up in A&E all the time because I was losing so much blood, and in the end it was decided that I would have an ablation. Now my gynecologist at the time decided to do a scan beforehand so she could see what was going on, and they discovered that I had quite a lot of fibroids, one of them being very large, and I also had a cyst on my what they call a simple cyst on my right ovary. So she felt confident that she could do a vaginal, yes, I did say vagina, I'm sorry guys, but there's going to be a lot of TMI going on, so if you can't cope, don't watch. She was going to do a vaginal laparoscopic assisted hysterectomy, which basically means that they take your womb out through your vagina, which sounds incredibly great, doesn't it? Unfortunately, when she got in there with the camera, she realised that things were a lot bigger than the scan originally showed, and so she had to convert the surgery to an abdominal one, which is where they put an incision and then they remove everything through there. The actual operation, I recovered quite well in the sense of I woke up well, discovered I was allergic to buscopan. That was the only thing that was weird. I went home at day 3. At day 9 I got quite a bad water infection and I started to be incontinent, urinary incontinent. In layman's term, I was pissing myself basically. I couldn't get to the toilet no matter how hard I tried, and basically the GP thought it was a combination of the urinary infection that I'd had and also that I was very badly bruised and swollen. Anyway, this carried on and I went to have my post-op with my GP because my gynecologist had decided to retire right in the middle of me recovering from my operation. She used a speculum to check my vaginal cuff. Basically, when you have a hysterectomy and you have your uterus taken out, they support your vagina with ligaments along the way, which basically holds your vagina up inside you, and also they sew the end up and this becomes your vaginal cuff. So what they do when they do post-op is they use the speculum very carefully, because you're still quite sore and a bit tender, to check that the vaginal cuff is holding well and that you have no sign of prolapse, which is where the vagina drops down basically, so that, you know, the ligaments that they use to hold it up may not necessarily be doing their job. So she used the speculum to inspect in the inside of my vagina and said that she was a little bit concerned because she could see urine in the top of my vagina, and this can be a sign of what's called a Vesicovaginal Fistula. You can Google that. I will try and remember to put a link in the doobly-doo down below. So if you're suspecting that you have one of these, I'm going to share my story with you throughout what's happening to me, so that you can see somebody actually going through it. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this video is I wanted to share my experience with others. Not everyone's experience is negative and not everyone's experience is positive, but I'm right at the beginning of what's happening to me, so I'm going to vlog throughout this so that you can see how I get on. So my GP referred me to the gynecologist at Gloucester Royal, and I was sent to a specialist gynecology nurse there, where I was examined internally without a speculum, and I had my bladder scanned to see if I was retaining fluid within my bladder, and the nurse concluded that it was not a fistula. Her exact words to me were that my vagina was too dry for it to be a fistula, and that in all likelihood that it would get better by itself, because she felt there was a lot of bruising going on, and that I couldn't feel my pelvic floor very well, which she felt would get better as I healed. I was referred to the women's health physiotherapist, who is a specialist in bladder issues. I was given a device which is an electric probe which you insert into the vagina, and you use electrical stimulation to try and sort of jolt the pelvic floor into working, because I was doing all the exercises and my incontinence was not getting any better, and I was constantly flooding through my clothing, wetting myself, even with pads. I used the strongest pad that I can have, and I was still wetting through all my clothing on many occasions, because it was thought that my bladder would occasionally go into spasm, which would then push the urine out very quickly, and the pads were not quick enough to absorb. I tried every single pad on the planet. I tried tenor ladies, a tens, all sorts, and the tenor night worked quite well for me at night, but not during the day, because they're quite wide at the back and were very uncomfortable, and were actually rubbing my bottom raw, so I couldn't wear them during the day. So I actually wear Wilko's, as in Wilkinson's heaviest pad that they do, not a nappy, a pad, and I actually find they work quite well as long as I change them every sort of couple of hours. So we get to December, and the physiotherapist said to me that this isn't right, you know, you should be showing some improvement, and you're not. So she decided to speak to my GP about having me re-referred to the gynecologist. Cup of tea. So I got to see my GP, and she referred me back to the gynecologist, and I got something called a choice letter, which means that I can choose where I go, and all the dates were for like 4 months or something. So I rang up Choice, and the dates that they had on there was one that was earlier, about a month and a half earlier, was the Spires in Worcester, which is a private clinic, so I accepted that one, and I saw a Dr. Moran there, very nice man, who gave me a very, very thorough examination with 2 types of speculum. I had my leg in the air, it was very indignified, and he basically poured off the end of the speculum urine and was kind of like, well, I'm 99% certain that what you're dealing with is a fistula. Oh, I'm very surprised at that, because I was told that I didn't have a fistula. Anyhow, he decided that he needed to do some follow-up tests to confirm his diagnosis. So I had a CT scan, which is where they inject a medicine into you that makes your kidneys work 20 times faster, and then they put like a dye in your blood, and they can see everything pumping and working how it should be, which was excruciating, because they told me to drink up to 2 litres of fluid beforehand, which probably was not the best idea in the world, and I ended up in agony on the table and almost screaming because it was hurting so badly, and I literally just wet all over the table. It was awful. It was like a waterfall coming out. It was really unpleasant. And then once I was waiting in the waiting room for the drugs to wear off, they came running through and asked me to come back the next day for an MRI, which obviously was quite worrying, because I was like, well, why are they suddenly asking for an MRI? So I went up the next day for an MRI, and then my cystoscopy was due to be done. It's called a flexible cystoscopy, was done the following week. The flexible cystoscopy is not the most pleasant thing in the world, but it is not painful. Well, I fib a little bit, okay? The first tiny half a second is painful. They basically put a flexible cystoscopy camera up through your urethra into your bladder. And the first bit is the only bit that hurts. It's a bit like a catheter. You get a little stinging sensation, but it didn't really hurt. And then you can actually see on a big TV in front of you the inside of your bladder. And so this filming of my bladder showed at the bottom of my bladder a very large 2 to 3 centimetre hole in my bladder, which confirmed the fistula, and also showed tethering at the top of my bladder, which they're not sure why that's being happened. It could be that I have adhesions pulling the bladder up, or it could be old scarring. They're not 100% certain. I was then referred to a gynecology oncologist called Catherine Hillaby, who is lovely, really lovely person, who I went to see, was very upset for me because part of the MRI and the CT scan showed that I had a large 8 centimetre complex tumour on my left remaining ovary. So she was a bit upset for me because obviously I'd been left for nearly a year basically, and this tumour had been allowed to be developed. I had blood tests to check whether they were cancerous or not, and the cancerous tumour markers came back negative. So they think that it is probably benign, but they won't know until they take the tumour out and send it to pathology, so they won't know. So she was going to do the surgery for the tumour, but wanted to do it at the same time as I had the repair for the fistula, so that I would only have to have one operation. Unfortunately, the urinary specialist that she referred me to did not feel confident to do the operation, and therefore he, although he took 6 weeks to decide this, he referred me down to a urinary institute in the southwest, who are supposed to be amazing. So I went to see them, and they didn't, for some reason they didn't have any of my scans, which was absolutely mad because I'd had all this tests and things and they didn't have any of it there, which was very frustrating. And he was able to fit me in to have another flexible cystoscopy whilst I was there, so that he could put on the notes that I definitely had a fistula. Now, believe it or not, it could have been worse. I could have had a rectal fistula, which is where you basically poop through your vagina instead of just wee through my vagina. I'm very incontinent. I'm on the moderate to severe end of the scale of incontinence. I can go to the toilet if the toilet is very close to me, if I need a wee or anything, but if I need a wee or anything and the loo's far away, I haven't got a chance in hell, because there's no way possible to control the urine flow because it's coming through the vagina. If the toilet is close enough, then by the time I get to the loo, some of my bladder is still full, and then I'm able to empty it normally. But otherwise, if I'm walking around doing normal stuff like people do, you know, go on days out or do my normal routine, working, whatever, then I just basically leak the whole time. It's like a massive leaky faucet the whole time. So I'm dealing with incontinence issues, definitely. At the moment, I am just being referred to a gynecologist in the Southwest hospital that I'm going to, because the gynecologist who was going to do the surgery can't do the surgery at this hospital, so she has referred me to somebody there to have my tumour removed at the same time as my fistula is repaired, but it all has to be done in one hospital. So I was originally supposed to have the surgery in June, it's now July, and this hasn't happened. I'm quite cross about the whole thing because I actually cancelled a holiday thinking that I was having my operation in June, and it's going to be quite a long recovery as it's a very complex repair just for the fistula, and then I've got to recover off also from the fact that I'm having my remaining ovary removed and a large tumour as well, and also, you know, their feeling is there's a lot of adhesions and things going on in there, so I may have to have other repairs. I don't know until they go in there. So at the moment I'm in quite a frustrating place, but I am right at the beginning of my journey, and most people who will Google vesicovaginal fistulas will not know who to turn to, will not know who to talk to, and I'm right at the beginning of my journey, right at the beginning of my repair. I'm going to follow this all the way through to its conclusion through my vlog, so that you can see all the things that I have to go through in order to have the repair done, you know, visits, whatever happens. I'm going to be very open about it, so you will know everything on my journey, and it is going to be TMI for some people, but if you have got a vesicovaginal fistula, you know, this is the information you want to know. Basically, this is what you're looking for when you Google it. When I googled it, I come across a site called HistoSisters, which is a site for people with hysterectomies. I did join it, but nearly all the stories on there are very, very negative. You don't get to see any positive. I'm obviously don't know what my outcome is going to be. It could be negative, it could be positive, but you're going to get the ups and downs of the entire journey, and also my day-to-day dealings with being incontinent, which, believe me, is not a good thing to have to deal with when you're only 45. I've had to deal with being incontinent for nearly a year now. It's not brilliant, and I will let you know my thoughts and feelings on that throughout as well. It's a subject that is just not talked about. Being incontinent, it isn't talked about, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, because most incontinence can be fixed. Most people who have incontinence issues will have a medical issue behind it, and unfortunately a lot of people will hide away and they won't talk about it. They don't go to see their GP about it. They become like a silent sufferer, and you don't need to. If you're incontinent, you do not need to suffer in silence. Anybody who's dealing with incontinence are really brave, in my opinion, because it's emotionally debilitating. It affects your confidence, it causes anxiety, it makes you feel anxious about going out, because you're constantly wondering, can you get to a toilet? You know, even if you're using large pads, etc., you know, you still have the issue of accidents, you know, where you can flood through your clothing. And I mean, I have literally wet through my clothing more times than I can count. You know, I do work part-time, and it's happened at work, and it's happened in supermarkets, and it's happened on days out, and you know, it is embarrassing when it happens, and it does cause its own anxieties. So hopefully my journey will help some of you. If you can relate to the things that I'm feeling, it might make you feel a bit better, it might make you feel more confident to do more things, and also my journey with my vesicovaginal fistula and my operation will hopefully show people what it's all about, what's really going to happen, and you can sort of be you know, inspired by it, feel less fearful, all those things, and I hope that it helps you. So that's my story so far. There's more to come.